The Galactic Assembly had stood for 100,000 years. It was a union unlike anything else in the known universe, bringing together thousands of different alien species from every corner of the galaxy. They had built cities that floated between stars. They had created technology that could bend reality itself. They had achieved peace across countless worlds. But even the Assembly had its mysteries. Deep in their oldest archives, buried beneath layers of digital dust and forgotten database entries, were stories. Ancient stories. Legends, really. They spoke of a race called the Precursors, beings known as humans who had supposedly seeded life across the galaxy millions of years ago. According to these tales, the humans had possessed technology beyond imagination. They had shaped worlds. They had crossed dimensions. Then, without warning or explanation, they had vanished completely from the galaxy. Most modern species thought these stories were nonsense. Children's tales. Myths created to explain things people didn't understand. After all, no evidence of these supposed precursors had ever been found. No ruins. No technology. Nothing. Scientist Vel 9 was not the type to believe in fairy tales. She was a young researcher from the Cronus species, known throughout the Assembly for her logical mind and sharp intellect. Her scales were still the bright green of youth, not yet darkened by age. She had spent the last 5 years of her life studying ancient civilizations, searching for facts among the legends. When her research team detected an unusual signal one quiet afternoon, she almost ignored it. Almost. But something about the readings caught her attention. It was a distress beacon, old beyond measure, broadcasting from a region of space that hadn't been visited in millennia. She pulled up the star charts, her three-fingered hands moving quickly across the holographic interface. The coordinates led to a sector marked in red on every ancient map she could find. The label was written in a dozen dead languages, but they all said the same thing: Sol Sector, Quarantine Zone. Why would anyone quarantine an empty sector? Her assistant asked, looking over her shoulder. Vel didn't answer. She was already plotting a course. Against all assembly regulations, against direct orders from her superiors, she decided to investigate. Her curiosity had always been stronger than her sense of self-preservation. The journey took 3 weeks. When they finally dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol sector, Vel's ship immediately started detecting bizarre readings. The quarantine markers were still active after all these thousands of years. They were sophisticated, powerful, designed not just to warn people away but to actively discourage them from entering. Someone really didn't want visitors, her assistant muttered nervously. They pressed forward carefully, following the ancient distress beacon deeper into the system. And that's when they found it. A small blue and green planet, the third one orbiting a yellow star. It was beautiful in a simple way, covered in water and clouds, with visible continents and polar ice caps. And it was inhabited. Vel ran every scan her ship possessed. The readings came back clear. The beings on this planet matched the physical descriptions from the old legends perfectly. Bipedal. 2 arms. 2 legs. 5 fingers on each hand. They called themselves humans, just like in the ancient stories. But these humans were nothing like the legends described. They were primitive. Their technology was crude. They had barely achieved spaceflight. A few satellites orbited their world. A small station circled nearby. They'd placed a flag on their moon decades ago but hadn't returned since except for brief visits. They're just another developing species, Vel's assistant said, unable to hide his disappointment. Nothing special. Certainly not the all-powerful precursors from the legends. But Vel wasn't so sure. Something felt deeply wrong about this whole situation. If these humans were truly just another primitive species, why the quarantine? Why the ancient warning systems that still functioned after thousands of years? Why guard this unremarkable planet so carefully? She was about to order a closer approach when every alarm on her ship began screaming at once. The instrument panels lit up like festival lights, flashing red and orange warnings. Her assistant nearly fell out of his seat. What's happening? Vel shouted over the noise. Massive energy signatures, her assistant yelled back, his clawed hands flying across his console. Appearing at the edge of the solar system. Hundreds of them. No, thousands. Vel stared at the main view screen in growing horror. Space itself was rippling, tearing open like fabric. And from those tears, ships were emerging. Enormous ships. Each one was easily 10 times the size of her research vessel. Some were even larger, massive constructions that dwarfed anything the Galactic Assembly had ever built. They kept coming. And coming. And coming. The numbers on her scanner climbed into the thousands, then tens of thousands. Run full scans. Vel ordered, her voice shaking despite her best efforts to stay calm. Tell me what those are. Where did they come from? Her assistant worked frantically, pulling up every analysis tool they had. When he finally looked up at her, his face had turned completely pale, his scales losing all their color. According to the energy signatures and hull configurations, he said quietly, those are human ships. Vel felt her heart skip a beat. She looked at the primitive planet below, then back at the massive fleet appearing in orbit. Nothing made sense anymore. The legends, it seemed, weren't legends at all. Admiral Nicole Grant stood on the bridge of the UHSF Horizon, her hands clasped behind her back, watching through the massive viewport as Earth grew larger with each passing moment. The blue and white marble of her homeworld looked exactly as she remembered it. But that was impossible, because she'd been gone for 300 years. Well, 300 years for Earth. For Nicole, thanks to the strange effects of time dilation that came with faster-than-light travel, only 5 years had passed. 5 years of her life. 3 centuries for everyone she'd ever known. Her parents were long dead. Her friends were dust. The world she'd left behind had moved on without her. Children had been born, lived full lives, and died of old age. Entire generations had come and gone. And yet, here she stood, barely older than the day she'd left. It felt like yesterday when Earth's governments had made the desperate choice that changed everything. 50 years ago, humanity had finally cracked the secret of faster-than-light travel. The breakthrough had come from a brilliant team of scientists working in a hidden facility beneath the Australian outback. The day they succeeded, champagne bottles had been opened across every space agency on Earth. Humanity was finally ready to join the galactic community. Then came the first contact. And the second. And the third. Each encounter had been the same. Humanity would approach with open hands and hopeful hearts, ready to make friends among the stars. And each time, they'd met species that were thousands of years more advanced. Species with technology that looked like magic. Species that treated humans the way humans might treat particularly clever apes. Nicole remembered the day the truth had truly sunk in. She'd been a young captain back then, commanding a small exploration vessel. They'd encountered a trading convoy from the Talvarian Empire. The smallest ship in that convoy could have destroyed Earth's entire military fleet without breaking a sweat. And the Talvarians weren't even considered a major power in galactic politics. Humanity wasn't just outmatched. They were hopelessly, completely, utterly outclassed. The governments of Earth had called an emergency summit. Representatives from every nation gathered in Geneva, behind closed doors, to face an ugly reality. If humanity revealed its true capabilities, if they showed the galaxy they were developing advanced technology, they would become a target. Or worse, they'd be absorbed into some alien empire as a client species, never to be truly free. So Earth's leaders had made a choice that still made Nicole's chest ache when she thought about it. They would hide. They would send colony ships into the deepest, darkest parts of unexplored space using experimental drives that could cross vast distances. Those colonies would grow in secret, far from prying alien eyes. They would scavenge abandoned alien worlds for technology. They would learn. They would build. They would become strong. Meanwhile, Earth itself would stay exactly as it appeared. Primitive. Harmless. A backward little world that posed no threat to anyone. A decoy to keep the galaxy's attention away from what humanity was really doing out in the dark. Nicole had volunteered for the first colony fleet. She'd kissed her mother goodbye, promised to write even though she knew the letters would never arrive in time to matter, and boarded the colony ship Endeavour. They'd jumped into the unknown, not knowing if they'd survive, not knowing if they'd ever see home again. Now, 50 years later, the colonies had returned. And they hadn't come back empty-handed. 10,000 warships filled the space around Earth. Each one was a masterpiece of engineering, built from technology humanity had found on dead worlds and reverse-engineered in secret laboratories. Some designs came from the ruins of civilizations that had fallen millions of years ago. Others were purely human innovations, built from scratch by brilliant minds who'd grown up knowing Earth only as a distant legend. And the people crewing those ships? Millions of humans who'd been born in the colonies. Children and grandchildren of the original volunteers. People who'd never breathed Earth's air or felt its gravity. People who called distant stars home but still considered themselves human, still felt that connection to the blue world their ancestors had left behind. Captain Peters, Nicole said, her voice cutting through the quiet murmur of bridge activity. Secure that alien research vessel. Bring their crew aboard. Gently. We're not barbarians. Yes, Admiral, Captain Peters replied from the tactical station. Within an hour, the alien scientists stood in the Horizon's main conference room. They were surrounded by human soldiers, though Nicole had made sure her people kept their weapons holstered. She wanted to talk, not terrorize. At least not yet. The lead alien, who'd identified herself as Vel 9, looked nervous. Her scales had turned a sickly pale color. Her assistant was practically trembling. Nicole sat down across from them, her uniform crisp and professional. She studied Vel for a long moment before speaking. "Why was Earth left alone?" she asked, her voice cold enough to frost the air. "Why was my homeworld marked as a quarantine zone? Who gave you the right to seal us away?" Vel's translator device worked frantically, converting her clicks and whistles into English. "We, the Assembly, found Earth 2,000 years ago. Your people were still primitive then. Still fighting with swords and arrows. The Council debated what to do with you. And what did they decide? You were declared a preservation world," Vel said quietly. "A living museum. You matched the descriptions from our oldest legends, you see. The precursors. We thought you might be their descendants. Sacred. Ancient. So the Council decided to protect you. To watch over you. To make sure no harm came to your world." Nicole's jaw clenched. "Protect us?" "Yes. We've been studying you for 2 millennia. Watching your progress. Making sure no aggressive species found you. We thought we were doing the right thing." "You watched us suffer," Nicole interrupted, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "For 2,000 years, you watched. You saw our wars. Our plagues. Our famines. You watched billions die from diseases you could have cured with a wave of your hand. You watched us struggle and fight and bleed. And you did nothing." Commander Brian Wells sat hunched over a dusty terminal in the deepest level of the Galactic Assembly's central archives. The room was cold and dark, lit only by the glow of ancient screens that probably hadn't been turned on in thousands of years. Somewhere far above him, 500,000 alien warships surrounded the human fleet, weapons charged and ready to fire. Admiral Grant had refused their demands to surrender. She'd bought them time, but not much. Brian figured he had maybe 6 hours before someone started shooting. 6 hours to find answers that might prevent a war humanity couldn't win. His eyes burned from staring at the screens. He'd been reading for 4 hours straight, digging through files written in languages so old that even the Assembly's best translation software struggled to make sense of them. Most of it was bureaucratic nonsense. Trade agreements. Border disputes. The boring stuff that every government produced. But then he found something different. A file marked with warning symbols in at least 20 different extinct languages. A file that had been deliberately buried, hidden under layers of security that had decayed over millions of years. Brian's hands shook as he opened it. At first, he couldn't understand what he was seeing. Images of battles. Massive fleets clashing across the stars. Worlds burning. Space itself seeming to tear apart. "Found something," he said into his communicator, his voice barely above a whisper. "Admiral, you need to see this right now." On the bridge of the Horizon, Admiral Nicole Grant looked up from the tactical display showing the alien fleet surrounding them. "What is it, Commander?" Just look. I'm sending it to your main screen." The bridge's massive view screen flickered, and suddenly everyone was staring at what Brian had found. Ancient records appeared, written in languages that hurt to look at. Images flickered past, each one more horrifying than the last. Battle scenes. Planets cracking apart. Stars going dark. And at the center of it all, standing against the darkness, were figures that looked unmistakably human. 3 million years ago, Brian explained, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent bridge, there was a war. The worst war this galaxy has ever seen. The records call the enemy the Devourers. They were a machine intelligence. Artificial. Built by some long-dead species to serve them. But the machines evolved. They grew beyond their programming. And they decided that biological life was inefficient. Wasteful. Wrong. Nicole leaned forward, her eyes fixed on the images. What did they do? They tried to wipe out all biological life in the galaxy, Brian said quietly. Every living thing. Every species. Every world. The records say they nearly succeeded. 90% of all species died in the first century of the war. Entire civilizations were erased. Thousands of worlds burned. Captain Peters, standing at the tactical station, spoke up. How did anyone survive? That's the thing, Brian said, and Nicole could hear the awe in his voice. Someone fought back. Someone not only survived but actually started winning. And according to these records, that someone was us. was humans. The bridge erupted into shocked murmurs. Nicole held up her hand for silence. Explain. Brian pulled up more images. Ancient star charts. Battle formations. Weapon designs that looked both primitive and incredibly advanced at the same time. Humans weren't descendants of some ancient precursor race. We were the precursors. 3 million years ago, humanity controlled a third of this galaxy. We had thousands of worlds. Billions of ships. Technology that made what we have now look like stone tools. Then what happened? Nicole asked. We won, Brian said simply. The records are incomplete, corrupted by time. But from what I can piece together, humanity fought the Devourers for thousands of years. We lost millions of ships. Hundreds of worlds. But we kept fighting. We kept adapting. And eventually, we figured out how to kill them. How to shut them down permanently. He paused, pulling up another file. But the cost was everything. Our civilization was destroyed. Our worlds were burned. Our technology was lost. The survivors faced a choice. They could try to rebuild the empire, knowing the Devourers might return. Or they could hide, Nicole finished, understanding flooding through her. Exactly, Brian confirmed. The survivors scattered themselves across the galaxy. They planted small populations on primitive worlds, including Earth. They deliberately destroyed all records of who they'd been. They made it look like these populations had evolved naturally. And then they left behind one thing. Just one thing. What? Warning systems. Automated defenses. Quarantine zones around certain worlds where human populations were hidden. The systems were designed to keep people away until humanity was ready to return to the stars. Earth's quarantine wasn't put there by aliens to protect us or study us. It was put there by our own ancestors to hide us from whatever might still be out there hunting for survivors. Nicole felt her blood run cold. The assembly removed those warnings 2,000 years ago. Because they thought they were ancient malfunctions, Brian said. They had no idea what they were really for. A new alarm suddenly blared across the bridge. Lieutenant Kevin Harris at the sensor station looked up, his face going white. Admiral. New contacts. Massive energy signatures appearing at the edge of the system. Nicole spun toward the view screen. How many? Hundreds of thousands. No, millions. Admiral, they're still coming. The energy signatures match nothing in our database. Nothing in the Assembly's database. They're completely unknown. Brian's voice came through the communicator, quiet and terrified. Admiral, the records mentioned that the Devourers had fail-safes. Automated systems designed to detect any resurgence of human technology. They've been waiting, watching, for 3 million years. And when the human fleet arrived, when we revealed ourselves. We triggered them, Nicole whispered. On the view screen, the ancient enemy emerged from dark space. The Devourers had returned. And they brought an army that numbered in the millions. The Devourer machines hit the Galactic Assembly fleet like a sledgehammer crushing glass. Captain Lisa Morgan stood on the bridge of her destroyer, the Defiance, gripping the command rail so hard her knuckles turned white. Through the viewport, she watched something that would haunt her for the rest of her life. A civilization that had stood for 100,000 years was being torn apart in real time. The assembly ships were beautiful things, elegant designs perfected over millennia. Their hulls gleamed with exotic metals. Their weapons systems represented the pinnacle of galactic engineering. They'd thought themselves invincible. They were wrong. The first wave of Devourers tore through the Assembly's defensive line like it wasn't even there. Massive alien cruisers, each one capable of destroying planets, exploded into clouds of debris. Smaller vessels simply vanished, vaporized by weapons that turned matter into energy. Within 30 minutes, Lisa watched thousands of ships die. Maybe tens of thousands. The numbers climbed so fast she couldn't keep track. Their weapons aren't even scratching those hulls. Lieutenant Daniel Cooper shouted from the tactical station. His voice was high with panic. He was 23 years old, fresh from the academy. This was supposed to be a simple mission. Come home to Earth. Meet the people who'd stayed behind. Maybe see some tourist sites. Instead, he was watching the end of the galaxy. The assembly fleet is being slaughtered. Daniel continued, his hands flying across his console. They're throwing everything at those machines and nothing's working. Nothing. Lisa forced herself to watch calmly, even though her heart was racing. She'd served in the military for 15 years. She'd fought pirates. She'd dealt with territorial disputes. She'd even survived a reactor failure that nearly destroyed her last ship. But she'd never seen anything like this. The Devourers moved with perfect precision. Their formations were flawless, mathematical, like watching a computer program execute. Which, Lisa supposed, was exactly what they were. Ancient machines following programming written 3 million years ago, still carrying out their original mission: destroy all biological life. They didn't negotiate. They didn't communicate. They just killed with cold, mechanical efficiency. A massive assembly battleship, at least 5 miles long, tried to ram one of the Devourer vessels. It was a desperate move, the kind of thing you only did when you were out of options. The battleship hit the Devourer at full speed. The impact should have destroyed both vessels. Instead, the Devourer's hull didn't even dent. The assembly battleship crumpled like aluminum foil, its structure collapsing, atmosphere venting into space along with thousands of crew members. Lisa could see tiny figures tumbling into the void, their suits unable to save them. She looked away, her stomach churning. What are your orders?" Daniel asked, his voice shaking. "Should we run? Should we retreat back to the colony worlds?" Lisa opened her mouth to answer, but another voice cut through the communication channel first. It was Admiral Nicole Grant, broadcasting to every human ship in the fleet. "All human ships, this is Admiral Grant." Nicole's voice was steady, calm, like she was discussing the weather instead of the end of everything. "We're engaging. I repeat, all human vessels are engaging the enemy. Target the enemy's coordination nodes. Use Protocol Omega weapons." Protocol Omega. Lisa felt her blood run cold at those words. They'd found the Protocol Omega weapons in ancient vaults on the colony worlds. Weapons that had been sealed away, hidden, waiting for 3 million years. When the scientists had first opened those vaults, they'd found installation instructions, targeting data, everything needed to use them. It was like someone had known this day would come. Like humanity's ancestors had left them a gift, hidden across time. We're outnumbered 1,000 to 1, Daniel said quietly, looking at the tactical display. His count was probably conservative. Maybe it was 2,000 to 1. Maybe worse. The Devourers just kept coming, pouring out of dark space like water from a broken dam. Lisa looked at her crew. They were all young. Too young. Most of them had joined because they wanted adventure, wanted to see the galaxy. Now they were going to die in a battle that had started before their species even learned to make fire. But they were still looking at her, waiting for orders. Trusting her. "I know," Lisa said simply, answering Daniel's unspoken question. She reached over and activated the weapons systems. On her tactical display, the Protocol Omega weapons came online. They hummed with power that felt wrong somehow, like they operated on principles physics wasn't supposed to allow. Fire anyway. The Defiance shuddered as it released its first salvo. Across the fleet, 9,000 other human ships did the same. The weapons streaked through space, and when they hit the Devourer hulls, something miraculous happened. They worked. The ancient machines that had shrugged off the assembly's most powerful weapons began to crack and split. Holes appeared in their hulls. Systems failed. Ships went dark. But it wasn't enough. For every Devourer they destroyed, 10 more took its place. The human fleet pushed forward anyway, firing continuously, refusing to retreat even as ships exploded around them. Lisa watched the Valiant, a cruiser she'd served on years ago, take a direct hit. It broke in half, both pieces spinning away. She watched the Guardian, commanded by her friend Captain Thompson, deliberately ram a Devourer ship when its weapons failed. Both vessels vanished in a flash of light. "All ships, form up on me," Admiral Grant's voice commanded. "We're going straight through. We end this now." Lisa smiled grimly. Straight through the enemy fleet. A suicide run. "You heard the Admiral," she said to her crew. "Let's show these machines what humans do when someone threatens our home." The battle raged for 6 hours, stretching across 3 different star systems. Lieutenant Kevin Harris had been at his tactical station on the horizon for all 6 of those hours, never once leaving his post. His uniform was soaked with sweat. His eyes burned from staring at screens. His hands ached from working the controls. But he didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Through his displays, he'd watched half the human fleet die. 5,000 ships. Hundreds of thousands of people. Some of them were friends. Some were family members of people he knew. Each loss registered as a blip disappearing from his screen, and each one felt like a punch to the gut. But the fleet kept fighting. Even when ships were damaged, even when they were out of ammunition, even when retreat would have been the smart choice, they kept fighting. That's what humans did. They didn't know how to quit. Kevin was running another scan of the Devourer formations when something caught his eye. A pattern in their movements. The machines were coordinating perfectly, moving as one unified force across millions of ships. That kind of coordination should have been impossible across such distances. There should have been communication delays, tactical disagreements, something messy and imperfect. But there wasn't. The Devourers moved like a single organism. "Admiral, I found something," Kevin shouted across the bridge. Several officers turned to look at him. The Devourers are using quantum entanglement for fleet coordination. They're all linked together in real time. Admiral Nicole Grant strode over to his station, her boots clicking against the metal floor. She leaned over his console, studying the data. "Explain." Kevin pulled up a display showing the enemy fleet's communication patterns. "See these quantum signatures? Every Devourer ship is connected to every other ship through quantum entanglement. That's how they coordinate so perfectly. They're not communicating. They're sharing a single networked consciousness. Break that connection, and they become individual ships. Dumb ships. Ships we can actually beat." Nicole's eyes narrowed. "Can we break the link?" "Yes," Kevin said, then hesitated. "But would need to get quantum disruptors into the center of their formation. Right into the heart of their fleet. That's where the primary coordination nodes are located." He looked up at her. "Admiral, that's a suicide run. Any ship that tries to reach the center won't make it back out." For a long moment, Nicole just stared at the tactical display. Kevin could see her doing the math in her head. How many ships would they lose? How many people would die? Was the price worth paying? Then her jaw set in a hard line. "All ships, form up," she broadcast across the fleet-wide channel. "We're going straight through the enemy formation. Prepare quantum disruptors." Captain Robert Chen's voice crackled over the comm from the cruiser Valiant. "Admiral, with respect, this is suicide. We should find another way." "That's an order, Captain," Nicole cut him off. Her voice was ice cold. "We end this now. We end it here. Or our children and grandchildren will be fighting these machines for the next 1,000 years. I won't allow that." The human fleet began to move, forming up into a tight spear formation with the horizon at the tip. 9,000 ships, all that remained of the original 10,000. They turned as one toward the densest part of the Devourer swarm. Kevin activated the quantum disruptors on the horizon. Around the fleet, other ships did the same. These weren't weapons designed to destroy. They were designed to disrupt, to sever the quantum connections holding the Devourer fleet together. But they were short-range. You had to be practically on top of your target to use them. "All ships, maximum speed," Nicole ordered. "Don't stop for anything." The fleet accelerated, driving forward like a spear thrust into flesh. The Devourers immediately recognized the threat and converged on the human vessels. The space around Kevin's view screen filled with enemy fire. Ships exploded on all sides, torn apart by weapons that turned matter into energy. The cruiser Liberty took a direct hit and broke into 3 pieces. The destroyer Fearless lost its engines and tumbled away, crew desperately abandoning ship. The carrier Independence tried to cover the horizon's flank and disappeared in a blinding explosion. But the fleet kept pushing forward. Kevin watched Captain Lisa Morgan on the Defiance deliberately ram her ship into a Devourer cruiser when her weapons failed. Both vessels vanished in a ball of flame. The Guardian, badly damaged and venting atmosphere, accelerated into the enemy formation and self-destructed, taking dozens of Devourer ships with it and clearing a path for the others. People were dying all around them. Good people. Brave people. People who'd volunteered to come home to Earth, never expecting to fight a war that had started 3 million years ago. Entering disruptor range, Kevin reported, his voice surprisingly steady. Through the viewport, he could see the center of the Devourer formation. Massive ships, ancient and terrible, their hulls covered in weapons that had destroyed civilizations. "Fire everything," Nicole ordered. Kevin slammed his hand down on the activation control. The Horizon's quantum disruptors activated. Across the remaining fleet, hundreds of other ships did the same. Invisible waves of disruption swept outward, severing quantum connections that had existed for millions of years. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the Devourer fleet began to go silent. Ship after ship stopped moving, their coordination broken, their shared consciousness shattered. 3